we've got a question for you. Do you feel confident raising a boy to become a man? And not just any man, a man who provides value to his community, a man who is confident and who will be able to navigate all of the challenges life brings. That's what we're going to talk about in this video today. What's up, Avery?
What's up, Pops? How you doing?
I'm good, man. How are you?
I'm good. I'm good. I'm looking forward to this conversation because it is crucial. But before we dive in, make sure that you like this video and subscribe to this channel. Now, we also want to tell you about Father-Son Foundations, which is our live group coaching programs for dads of sons under the age of 12 years old. It's for pops, for fathers that are looking to build that foundational relationship before the teenage years, before life gets real crazy. So if that's you, make sure to check out the information in the description below and in the comments below.
Yes, yes. So listen, there's a gentleman by the name of Scott Galloway who's a successful businessman and an author. He recently wrote a book that I picked up called Notes to Being a Man. And then right after I got the book, I saw him on an interview on MSNBC, and he was talking about something that Avery and I know to be true, and it's a big problem for the generation of men who are upcoming. So we're going to play some clips from that interview, and then we're going to talk about it on the other side.
These are addressable, fixable problems with common sense solutions.
So, Scott, let's talk about that in small, personal ways. I have two sons. One is 14, the other will turn 11 later. What are some things that you would tell me, to tell parents of young men, teenagers, whatever, what should we be doing to set them up in a more healthy way?
So if you were to reverse engineer to the single point of failure when a boy comes off the tracks, it's when he loses a male role model through death, divorce, abandonment. The moment a boy loses a male role model, at that moment he becomes more likely to be incarcerated than graduate from college. So the first thing is, and it sounds like you've already done this, you've already checked this box, is that we have to get men involved in a young man's life. There's just certain things a young man can't listen to unless it's from a man. And even just saying that 5 years ago, that men need to be involved in a young man's life, was seen as triggering. I was raised by a single immigrant mother, lived and died a secretary, lied of my life. But she knew right away that we needed to get men involved.
You know, the thing that really resonated with me when he was talking about young men needing male role models, and there's just some things that young men have to hear from men. And that's also true. It's one of the reasons that fathers have to really be engaged in their sons' lives, particularly in those younger foundational years. You know, for the past couple of years, you and I have done a lot of work in the education sector, whether it be with school districts, offices of education, Head Start organizations. And one of the biggest things that we always hear is a problem is male engagement, fatherhood engagement. And, you know, the research is there to show if a man is involved in his son's education, for example, you know, they have a different attitude towards learning. They tend to go further academically. They tend to do better academically. It doesn't mean that every son is meant for college, right? Some people are meant for trade school. Other people may be entrepreneurs. Other people may go to the military. But if you can get their minds or shape their mindsets to learn along the way, no matter what it is that they do, they're going to be better off for it. But the father engagement piece is really, really big. What do you think about the first clip?
Yeah, I think it reminds me of when I was growing up and just how engaged you were, especially in my academics. And I didn't always care for that, right? I was not the biggest fan of you having good relationships with my teachers. I wasn't the biggest fan of you checking my power school after I had big tests during the week, right? But it let me know just how important my academics were. And you weren't always the type of parent to demand that it was straight A's or nothing, but you demanded that we give it our best shot. And
Yeah.
you knew me. You knew that if I worked harder, I could get a better grade sometimes, right? So that engagement helped me develop a sense of responsibility. It helped me develop a sense of achievement drive, if you will, because I didn't want to hear you. I didn't want to hear you talk about, oh, so you only got a B on this test. Why couldn't you get an A on this test? Not because you were like, you need to have all A's, but because you were pushing me to my limits. You were pushing me to test where are my expectations at? Not only the ones you were placing on me, but where are the expectations that I have for myself, right? So, I have gotten that from mama? Yes. But the fact that you were there, you were the one telling me this, it let me know it just gave it a greater sense of importance that I have both parents talking about, or being engaged with me in that way. Now, obviously, I know you were my AAU basketball coach, so you were definitely engaged with me outside of school as well. But the balance, I needed to have that balance, and I think that was really important for me.
Yeah, basically, you just told everybody that I wasn't the perfect father, which I admittedly was not the perfect father. And that's what fathers need to understand. Your son doesn't need you to be perfect, he just needs you to be present.
Mm.
And that makes all the difference in the world in his eyes when you make sure that you are there for him. Let's watch the second clip, and then we'll talk about it on the other side.
They were up against an indomitable foe. Basically, essentially, our economy now is a giant bet on AI and big tech. And their big bet is they can keep you on your phone sequestered from your key relationships. But these are absolutely things we can solve. And just to call out, Joe and I, we have a debt. And that debt is paid back in one of two ways. On a very emotional, personal level, we have an obligation to get involved in young men's lives. The ultimate expression of masculinity is to get involved in the life and take an irrational interest in the well-being of a child that is not biologically yours. There are 3 times as many women applying to be big sisters in New York as there are men applying to be big brothers. If we want better men, we need to be better men. And the group that pisses me off the most are the most fortunate in the world, and that is tech bros, who are under the impression that it was all their character and their grit, and not a lot of their success is not their fault. We have a debt to get back involved in young men's lives, both emotionally and socially and fiscally, and start restoring more economic opportunity, young men. 75% of women say economic viability is important in a mate, only 25% of women. Beyonce could work at McDonald's and marry Jay-Z. The opposite is not true. And we don't even like to talk about it, but it's true. And
that was very real for me when he talked about keeping young people sequestered from the relationships in their lives. That's so true. When you were growing up, as you well know, your mom and I were not about screen time. We weren't about distractions. We were about like keeping you on a path where you could stay focused. And I always just felt like things like, Facebook, which was big at the time when you were growing up, was nothing but a distraction. As a matter of fact, by the time we told you you could go ahead and have a Facebook account, you looked at us like we were crazy, and you just said, I don't even want to deal with any of that right now. But I think it's very, very important that we as dads make sure that we're not in competition with technology right now. The other part about that clip that I absolutely loved is when he talked about in New York City, the number of women who were involved with the Big Sister program in comparison to the number of men that are involved in the Big Brother program. And I got to give you your props right now because you are a life coach for young men in the city of Chicago between the ages of 13 and 19. Been involved in that for it's been about 6 months now?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, 6 months now. Talk about that a little bit and why you felt like that was something that you wanted to do or maybe even needed to do at this point in time in your life.
Yeah, well, we can't brush over the last statement that Scott made in that clip, which was the fact that Beyonce can work at McDonald's and end up with Jay-Z, but the opposite just isn't true. I feel like that was a bar. I can't just brush over that because I saw that. I said, yeah, that's facts right there. But as far as the mentorship program that I joined, I've always been shown the value of being service oriented and joining community led projects. And so I went to a high school where the motto was enter to learn, leave to serve. All of these different moments during my childhood made it very clear that giving back is the right thing to do. And it's something that we ought to do at different periods and at different points in our lives. And so I came across an organization out here called I Am a Gentleman. And they work with youth around the Chicagoland area between the ages of 13 and 19. And I mean, I've been blown away at some of the connections and the relationships that I've forged with these young men because they're so sharp, they're so bright, and yet they don't always have the safe spaces to express themselves. And on a week to week basis, you just never know what kind of baggage that they're coming into the space with. And so it doesn't take a lot. As a young man myself, it doesn't take a lot to provide some positivity into the life of a teenager these days. I mean, we just had a conversation in session around fatherhood and what does fatherhood mean to all of them, and it drove a lot of emotions, but there was a big sense of confusion for a lot of the young men, and from that confusion can lead to anger, can lead to a bit of rage, can lead to a lack of trust in the adults in their lives. And so, yeah, I've always felt the need to, if I'm able to, I should help others. And I'm fortunate. I got lucky to have a great example of a father and a great example and a mother. And not everybody has that opportunity. So I do feel called to reach back to the next generation. I feel called to helping someone out. I feel called to connecting with someone because I believe that we can all learn something from each individual. Sometimes good, sometimes not so good. But the bigger point is, you know, being of service to others is necessity.
I agree with you, and it makes me think about one of the things that we always say in our FatherShift program. Any man can have a child, but a father builds a legacy, and that indeed is the difference. Let's look at one more clip, and then we'll comment on the other side.
What can be done about this online issue, both work, education, and for the young boys that aren't athletically talented, who frankly have so much? I have some grandsons that struggle for various reasons with their athletic ability, and they feel, I believe, like somehow they are less than the grandsons who are excelling in sports. How do we get at that at a younger age for these boys?
It's a thoughtful question. So a couple of things you mentioned, college and high school sports. Unfortunately, the participation in college and high school sports is directly correlated to your household income. 4/5 of people in the upper quintile of income-earning households go to college. It's only 1 in 5 in the lowest quintile. Sports has now become a function of how much money your parents have.
Right.
But the way I would use it, the term I would use is guardrails. Young men need guardrails.
Yeah, he hit home with that when he was talking about the correlation between college sports coming from households of money. As somebody that coached AAU travel ball for over 10 years, that's a fact. AAU can be very, very expensive. Fortunately, for many of the years that I did it, we had sponsorships for our teams, so it made it a lot easier. But Claire McCaskill was talking about the fact that she has some grandchildren that are athletic. She has other grandchildren that aren't very athletic. And I think what happens oftentimes with dads, and I learned this in the AAU world, like the big push is always sports, sports, sports. And it ends up that I had an athlete as a son in you. Your brother, who's younger than you, was a better athlete than you, but he didn't like sports. He gravitated to other things. And one of the things that I knew that I had to do as a father was support him in whatever it is that he liked to do, to make sure that he felt that I was just as involved in his activities as I was in your activities, even when I was coaching your teams. And fathers have to really understand that. Like, all of your kids are different. They're going to have different interests. They're going to have different capabilities, and you got to bring those capabilities out of them. It can't just be one size fits all. It's very, very important. And I saw a lot of dads that weren't getting that when I was in the AAU sports field. So, what do you think about that clip? Because the AAU thing really hit home with me. I don't know how you felt about that clip.
Well, I'll respond to what you said, then I'll respond to the clip.
Mhm.
Sometimes I wish that you were less into sports so that perhaps you weren't my AAU basketball coach for all them years, man, but you always felt like you had the best advice to give, whether that was at the game, at home, on the way to the game. So that's what I'll say about AAU. But the thing that Scott said in that interview or in that clip was around guardrail, young men guardrails. And I think you meaning you and Mama, did a really good job of providing certain guardrails for us when we were growing up. You mentioned the social media and lack thereof. That was a big part of my upbringing, right? But just overall phone usage. I recall being at dinner time, right? And if the phone was at the table, it was like, nah, you got to go put the phone in the bowl, take that out, take that away, right? And because it was about quality time that we were spending with one another. It was about socializing with one another. That's another thing that Scott said in these clips, was talking about the lack of social skills that young men are gaining these days because they're spending so much time staring at screens. And so, for any of the fathers watching this, your engagement is the best way to beat the algorithm. When your son is sitting there scrolling through, be engaged with them. Talk to
Yeah,
them about their day. Talk to them about their interests. Talk to them about things that aren't going well for them, what they're struggling with. That is going to be the best way to show them, to model the behavior in order to create well-rounded social young men.
yeah,
So yeah, that's what I
yeah.
got from that part.
Yeah. That's so real. I love that. Beat the algorithm. I got to remember that one. That's really, really good, Avery. I agree with you wholeheartedly about that. One of the things that I always tell fathers is, when you're having open conversations with your son, you'll never have to worry about what he's thinking about, because he's telling you.
Mhm.
And that's the one thing that dads have to, you got to get that cheat code, right? How to make sure that you're engaged with your son, so he's engaged with you and you're never wondering, what's happening with him. But so that was good. Excellent book. I'm about halfway through it now. I'm enjoying it, but it was ironic to see him do this interview right after I had gotten that book. So this was good. This was good. I enjoyed the conversation.
Definitely me too. And I got to get a copy of that book next. All right. Until next time, everyone.
Take care.